Hi, I'm so sorry that I have to be the one to do this, but I noticed something the other day when I was scrolling through the musical meme halls of TikTok that I just have to get off my chest. It's something I heard in a sound that I haven't been able to unhear ever since. And I think that it's probably insignificant. It probably doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things, but I'm kind of obsessed, so we're gonna get down to the bottom of it. I think that maybe there's a deceptively difficult question in what we're looking at today, which gets down to the bottom of how we as humans understand and process music itself. I mean, maybe it's either going to be that or the most in-depth, useless analysis of a meme song that I've ever done. Remember that gold dress that was actually blue a few years ago?
Social media is exploding this morning with a debate about one dress.
The fabric of this dress nearly caused the fabric of the internet to unravel overnight.
White and gold. That's what I see, anyway. Yeah.
No way, that's black and blue.
Everybody went to like DEFCON 5 immediately when someone disagreed. As soon as it was like you were questioning their something even more fundamental than their religion.
Or maybe to bring it a little closer to music, what about that Laurel Yanny conundrum?
Laurel.
This is the sound that's driving people nuts.
I hear Laurel. I mean, it's as clear as glass.
Maybe.
Last night I heard it on my phone, and I was sure I heard Yanny. I listened to it 25 times.
I hear Laurel.
Your team Laurel?
Team Laurel.
Brainstorm or Green Needle? Which do you hear?
I hear Kofefi.
Yeah, so this is kind of like that, but maybe a little bit more subtle and with music, or more specifically rhythm, or actually metrical orientation is probably the most apt way to put it.
They're running on metric time.
And not a whole lot of people have called attention to it yet, which is interesting given the virality of the video. But here it is. It begins with the song of the summer.
I'm looking for a man in finance with trust fund. 6'5", blue eyes.
If you don't know this video, consider yourself lucky that your Instagram feed doesn't currently look like mine. This video about looking for a 6'5" man in finance with a blue eyes and trust fund went mega viral. So viral that it reportedly earned original poster Megan Bonney, otherwise known as Girl on Couch, a licensing contract with Capitol Records. Okay, so what's going on here? Well, I want you to listen to it again, and this time imagine that there's music behind it.
I'm looking for a man in finance with trust fund. 6'5", blue eyes. Finance, trust fund. 6'5", blue eyes. I'm looking for a man. I'm looking for a man. I'm looking for finance, trust fund. 6'5", blue eyes. Finance, trust fund. 6'5", blue eyes.
Now, I'm willing to bet that the style of accompaniment that you probably imagined here is likely of the EDM, house, or techno remix variety. This is due to a number of reasons, from the lyrics, which tend to fit this kind of style, to the delivery and pacing, which mimics the chopped vocal samples commonly associated with these genres of music. It's giving late 2000s rave club music, if you know what I mean.
Now I'm feeling so fly, like a G6.
There are certain musical traits coded in the delivery of her song. Can we call it a song? I'm gonna call it a song, which informs us, the listener, roughly how the music that's not there should sound. But do we actually know how it's supposed to sound? Let me ask you a simple question. Where is the one? Let's try this one more time. Now, I want you to imagine that you are remixing this song. In your interpretation, where would you place beat 1?
I'm looking for a man in finance with trust fund. 6'5", blue eyes. Finance, trust fund. 6'5", blue eyes. I'm looking for a man. I'm looking for a man. I'm looking for finance, trust fund. 6'5", blue eyes. Finance, trust fund. 6'5", blue eyes.
Did you hear beat 1 right when the video started?
I'm looking for a man in finance with trust fund. 6'5", blue eyes.
Did you hear it at the word man?
I'm looking for a man in finance with trust fund. 6'5", blue eyes.
Maybe one should be on finance.
I'm looking for a man in finance with trust fund. 6'5", blue eyes. Finance.
Or perhaps we're on an offbeat altogether.
I'm looking for a man in finance with trust fund. 6'5", blue eyes.
Since there is no music, it could be ambiguous. But it's not, right? I mean, just in the same way that the zeitgeist of our time informs us implicitly that the music here, if composed, would and should sound something approximating Far East Movement's 2010 smash hit, Like a G6, we should also be able to intuit where the beat should fall on this particular sample. Surely. So where is it? Where is the downbeat? If you're anything like me, you're probably thinking, Levi, it's not that ambiguous. It's obvious. Finance is on 1, and I'm looking for a man in is on a 2-beat pickup. So 1, 2, I'm looking for a man in finance. And if you think that, get ready to question everything that you think you know. Because if we were to examine the beat placement of actual remixes done with this TikTok, of which there are thousands, we would find that a good amount of them interpret finance on beat 3.
I'm looking for a man in finance. 6'5", blue eyes, trust fund, finance. 6'5", blue eyes, trust fund, finance. 6'5", blue eyes, trust fund, finance. 6'5", blue eyes. Looking for a man in finance. 6'5", blue eyes, finance, trust fund. 6'5", blue eyes. I'm looking for a man in finance. 6'5", blue eyes, finance, trust fund. 6'5", blue eyes. I'm looking for a man in finance. Trust fund. 6'5", blue eyes, finance, trust fund. 6'5". I'm looking for a man. Looking for a man. Looking for a man. I'm looking for a man in finance. Trust fund. 6'5", blue eyes.
So what's going on here? Is this just a me thing? Have I fallen down the arrhythmic ambient rabbit hole so far that I can no longer properly count to 4? Or is this tune the new blue dress, gold dress debacle, but for musicians? Let's do the thing.
I'm looking for a man in finance. Trust fund. 6'5", blue eyes, finance, trust fund. 6'5", blue eyes. I'm looking for a man. Looking for a man. I'm looking for a man in finance. Trust fund. 6'5", blue eyes.
All right, let me just make sure we're recording. Okay. Simple question. Where do you hear the 1?
Ooh. Look, it's looking for a man in finance. There's a rest on 1, and then it's a pickup on 2, kind of like how a snare drum would be. So I hear, I'm looking for a man in finance, 1.
Wait, oh no, I have so many questions. Hold on.
Finance. Trust fund.
Ooh,
6'5".
it's hard to
blue eyes.
watch.
It is.
I'm looking for a guy in finance. 3, 4, 6'5", right?
I think it's on look. I'm looking for a man in finance. Trust fund. 6'5". Like there's the beat.
6'5", blue eye. Yeah, there's options here. Da-da. I would go for the end of the phrase. That's just what I would do.
Okay, so what word does that line up with?
I think eyes is the word there. Blue eyes. Blue eyes.
I think it's ambiguous.
So maybe it's a 3. I'm looking for a guy in finance. 6. Oh.
Oh, I'm looking for a man in, well, to me, finance is the 3.
Interesting question. So probably the most obvious answer for me would be an anacrusis of 2 beats and then 2 bars of a 4/4 where the beat 1 is on finance. So it's I'm looking for a man in finance. Da-da, 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 finance.
The way she does her pulse makes it sound not like a downbeat though. Like she's making it sound like an offbeat. Right? Like the way she says it, it doesn't feel doesn't feel pulse. You know, like when a big beat sounds like a big beat.
Yeah.
But they sound like offbeats, like backbeats.
I hear it as I'm looking for a man in finance. Trust fund. 6'5", blue eyes. Trust fund. 6'5", blue eyes. And I think that idea was further reinforced by I'm looking for a man, I'm looking for a man, I'm looking for a man, I'm looking for a like that remix approach. I don't know how else to say it. That's like my first thought. So that I can think of like where the 2 and the 4 are, like if it were an EDM remix.
I stand by my original one as a pickup. I'm looking for a guy in finance. 6'5", blue eyes.
Yeah. I think, I think that's totally fair. I also think there's like the issue of like, I don't think she's actually a musician, so it's like there's some interpretive stuff going on. And
I was gonna say her tempo, on the other hand.
But where's trust fund? I maybe have just like completely rewritten it in my head.
Yeah, that's so. I love that question. Like, where is the pickup? I suppose the way I'm programmed to imagine it in the way I articulate it is because like the phrases that she says, I feel like there's a few of them and they slot like into 4/4 measures. If you start on like, I am looking for a man in finance, 6'5", blue eyes, trust fund. Oh wait, oh shit, never mind. That's like a 2/4 right after.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So it is actually more square if you start on finance.
Well, because this is interesting, because my first thought is, like, I want to bring the phrase around and end the phrase. Like, I'm very focused on phrasing for right now, because I have, like, demos I'm working on. Like, it's interesting, because I'm in my genre really deeply right now, and that's how, like, we talk about stuff. I literally was doing demo stuff over the weekend. So that is very interesting, because I'm applying that thought process to the question you just asked. But this has nothing to do with, like, the genre that I've happened to have been working in for the last couple days. So that's interesting.
Everyone's had a completely different answer, and it's so interesting. I agree with you. I hear it as like a 2-beat pickup into finance on the one, because finance is like where she hits it heavy, right? So it's like there's I'm looking for a man in finance. There's she's accenting finance.
Feel like it feels like that's the big beat, and that I'm looking for a isn't a very solid statement.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. But it's also interesting. I'm wondering how much everyone's personal training in what style of music they usually plays a role into it, because some people are it seems to be either finance is on 3 or finance is on 1, and I've got some people being like it's kind of on an offbeat, and I'm like, I don't hear it as an offbeat, but a lot of people do. I'm looking for a man in finance.
That's just as people who don't know what a pickup feels like.
All right, so we are pretty clearly divided on where the downbeat is, and you can find examples of remixes that place this beat any which way. So who's right? And give me some leeway here. There's obviously no right or wrong way to do music. You can do it however you want, but you know what I mean. First, we're going back to basics. What is a downbeat, and why is it so important? There are essentially 2 commonly used definitions of this deceptively elusive term. The downbeat, classically speaking, is the strongest beat in the bar. This would be the one in a 4/4 groove. When you see conductors do this downward motion, they're indicating where the downbeat is. This is actually where the term got its name, according to my 1912 copy of the New England Conservatory of Music Encyclopedia. The downbeat is where you're likely to find chord changes back to the home chord, cymbal crashes, kick drum hits, and changes to new sections in a piece of music. The other way in which people commonly talk about downbeats is a bit more colloquial. You're more likely to encounter this in a pop, rock, or punk context, where it's normal to refer to any beat that's on the count as a downbeat. So in a 4/4 groove, that's 1, 2, 3, 4. Anything that's not on the count in this context is usually called an upbeat. It's also worth mentioning that anyone familiar with the first definition is going to cringe hearing the second, because these 2 camps of musicians use the same language to describe fundamentally different, albeit similar things. Someone who thinks a downbeat is synonymous with the one also thinks of every note that falls onto the count as onbeats, not downbeats, and everything outside of the count broadly as the offbeats, not the upbeats. I bring this up because I think it's a fascinating sort of microcosm to what's happening in this TikTok. Everyone's coming to the remix table with different backgrounds and different skill sets. Maybe it's no wonder why everyone looks at the same thing and sees something different. More on that in a second. Let's stick with our first definition of a downbeat here, the first beat of the bar. This is usually the part of the bar that has the highest degree of temporal weight to it. It's preceded by the upbeat, which is the last beat of any given measure. This is also called the anacrusis, a term borrowed from poetry that refers to unstressed syllables at the beginning of a line. Ana meaning towards, and crucis meaning to strike. If we have an anacrusis, we also must have a crucis, which, go figure, is yet another term for the downbeat. That's why a phrase is said to be crusic if it starts on the first beat of a measure. Side note, All remaining beats in the bar are called metacrusis. Not important to my point here, like at all, but I actually didn't know that until I was researching for this video and thought it was pretty neat. So yeah, metacrusis. Go impress your music friends with wildly useless music theory jargon. You'll be lauded on the bandstand for that, I'm sure. The crucis, the downbeat, the one, whatever you want to call it, is essential to establishing structure in Western music, and in the EDM genre in particular. When we find the one, we find control, we find understanding, and a perceptual framework that allows us to contextualize the music at hand. Just ask Bootsy Collins.
We've heard a lot throughout the filming that we've done about the one. Yeah. And nobody's really kind of defined it truly. Could you explain to people who don't know about the one and funk what it is?
Well, what I got from it, James was explaining to me, is like when I came to the band, we were like playing a bunch of crazy lines, lead lines. And James said, wait a minute, whoa. You know, he said, wait a minute, man, where's the one? And I'm saying, one, okay. One. What does he mean, where's the one? So he started doing a thing like, So I said, he said, you hear where that is at? I said, yeah. He said, that's the one. I said, oh, so you mean something like, Say what?
So it's where the love comes.
Symbol hit me.
That's the one.
That's the one.
And if you don't think he's serious about just how seriously we should be taking the downbeat, the dude literally wrote an album exclusively about the one.
True essence of the funk is the power of the one. It's the power of the one. You know this funk is just because.
What a crusic legend of a man. Okay, so the one is important. It's probably worth our time to try and figure out where it is so we can understand what's going on in this TikTok at a deep level. Even though it was almost certainly never intended to be scrutinized with this level of analysis. But here we are. Simple question. How do we find the one? It's one of those things that almost none of us actually sits down to think about, but we all intuitively do it all the time. We are always, whenever we listen to music, keeping track of the top of the bar. Ironically, parsing through the research, I don't feel like we have a complete picture of exactly how our intuition works in this context. That said, there are certainly a few components which I think reveal a lot about human downbeat perception. Those include a blend of embodied music cognition, intuition developed from cultural conditioning, and through context clues provided by the music itself. I'll go through each and lay out some of my thoughts. Embodied music cognition is all about how we feel and understand music through our bodies. You see, how we move to music can reveal a lot about how we hear it. This is facilitated through something called entrainment. Entrainment is a process of synchronization. A periodic temporal event will occur, like the tick of a metronome. And in response, a physiological rhythm may emerge that is phase-locked or entrained to that stimuli. Swaying back and forth, bobbing our heads, and tapping our foot to the beat are all ways that help us entrain to the pulse of a song. But that's not all it does. These physical processes are also crucial for understanding meter. The phenomenon of subjective rhythmization, whereby a sense of metrical pattern is experienced by individuals listening to an even, unaccented pulse, has been widely documented. Thaddeus Boulton back in the 1890s observed that people tend to group regular, unaccented, identically pitched clicks into groupings like 2s or 3s or 4s intuitively. He spent years of his life designing this machine to make clicks as evenly as possible to test that fact. And if you're wondering, why didn't he just use a metronome? Well, barring any accuracy issues that might arise from using an unregulated mechanical metronome, he feared that the visual cue from the pendulum itself would impart an intuitive sense of 2 or 4 in his listeners, thereby ruining his experiment. Boulton's findings have been tested again and again over the years, reconfirming a human tendency to understand things metrically, even if no actual meter is accented in the music itself. This is deeply intertwined with the idea of embodied music cognition, as has been well established by people like Jonathan Still, who notes in his 2015 paper, How Down is a a downbeat, quote, a listener will hear a stream of accentless pulses in 2 or 3 if she sways from side to side every 2 or 3 beats. Once a meter has been established this way, she will continue to hear it this way even if she stops swaying. How we sway, how we dance, how we nod our heads can have a profound impact on how we understand rhythm. So maybe, just maybe, we can divine the true placement of the one by analyzing how Girl on Couch physically embodies her song of the summer. Generally speaking, larger movements from the body in humans tends to indicate where pulse is felt most strongly. So we're looking for head movements, chest movements, and shoulder articulations for that. Arm and leg, and by extension hand and foot movement, are a huge one to look out for too, but since her legs are off camera and she's holding her phone with one hand while the other is out of frame, we're just gonna have to ignore those for the time being. Smaller motions like eye movement, eyebrow raising, and smaller head motion is something we'll watch out for too, but generally they don't indicate where the strong beats are. I've categorized movement on the right side of the screen here with these little metronome visualizers. The larger the metronome, the more significant the motion as measured by pixel deviation. So big metronome equals big motion, which should equal strong beat. And this will tell us how she is physically and internally feeling the beat. So where does her head movement begin? Well, let's flick off the audio and check. Although there are some micro movements before, the first big movement is right here, articulated with a head bob, establishing the beginning of an implied pulse. The data shows a pattern through her movement of a strong beat, weak beat repetition. Essentially, she's feeling it kind of like this. For simplicity's sake, let's think of finance as an anchor word and try to contextualize where the one might be in relation to that. Finance lands consistently on one of the stronger head movements. In fact, most of the stressed words here tend to correspond with stronger body motion in general. The weaker beats tend not to fall on stressed words. The way she is in training indicates the stronger beats are felt with the pulse of the words. It's probably fair, at minimum, to say that she's not intuiting the word finance on any kind of offbeat, which eliminates these possibilities for our downbeat. You could probably make the argument at this point that the word finance is either on 1, 2, 3, or 4. I'm tempted to speculate here more on my findings, but the more we rely on body motion as the absolute arbiter for metrical accent detection, the further I feel we get away from the truth of it. There has been quite a bit of research into entrainment and beat detection with large tapping studies, but not a whole lot of investigation into why we latch onto metrical thinking in the first place. How is it that we specifically identify and are so good at identifying the crucis amongst a sea of metacrucis? See what I did there? I used the word. Is it something that we're born with? Maybe it's a learned perceptual framework informed by the history and ongoings of our own cultural music. It's a question that doesn't quite have a clear answer. Tristan Jahan and his team from the Media Lab at MIT once proposed a predictive modeling strategy for detecting the downbeat. One of the most challenging things about this, Tristan argued, is that we don't have a really clear definition of a downbeat. It's pretty elusive, so it makes it really challenging to program an accurate beat detection algorithm. Quote, it's not surprising that downbeat turns out to be the most difficult metrical measure, since there's no well-defined heuristics regarding how humans actually manage to detect it. We claim that downbeat estimation requires a fair amount of prior knowledge, which may be acquired either consciously through active learning or unconsciously by experience with listening, a cultural bias. This discovery made it clear to the team that in order to model an accurate beat detecting software, they were going to have to train it. Maybe, perhaps, not unlike how humans have to be trained. We spend all of our lives with a common music coming at us from all directions. It's inescapable. You don't even need to study music exclusively to glean some of its foundational concepts, because like it or not, you're always listening. Context clues in a piece of music that are as simple as 2 beats, a kick and snare, orient our attention towards a specific time and place. We contextualize it, informed by memory, by past experience, and a shared musical worldview with those who made it in the first place. For most songs, after all, finding beat 1 is relatively easy. You'll hear certain tropes which will fall on certain beats, which will contextualize where you're at in a given measure. Let's say you have a 4/4 groove. In almost all cases, you'll hear the kick drum on 1, sometimes accompanied by a crash cymbal. This immediately alerts you to where you are in the bar. But what if we took that away? Would we be incapable of identifying the one? Well, of course not. We can still hear the fill on the anacrusis that gives away our location. But what if the drummer forgot his toms that day? Well, now it's a little bit more ambiguous. One could actually be where 3 is. With less information, there creeps in more ambiguity. Let's take it a step further. What if we deleted the hi-hats and the kicks entirely? You could still latch onto the one fairly cleanly because the snare anchors you to the groove, although there may still be some conflation with beat 3 depending on where you're dropped into this groove. But watch this. Let's change the snares into kicks. Kicks aren't supposed to go on 2 and 4 according to conventional wisdom. The snares, now kicks, are still in the exact same spot and will remain in the same spot uninterrupted, but after a while has passed and I move this little visualizer over, your brain will find it more and more difficult to understand this as not being on 1 and 3. For some, it might even flip. A similar phenomenon that some experience when told that this dress is actually blue, or that green needle is actually brainstorm. Identifying the downbeat is difficult because it's not something that has hard qualifiers built into its definition. It's contextual. It's defined by everything around it. And we haven't even spoken in terms of the potential harmonic context of what's going on in this TikTok. But you know, we probably won't. This analysis is already getting way too long as it is. Point is, downbeat is elusive, but it's also kind of obvious. You know, we can theorize about it, assign it numbers, give it fancy terms like crucis, but that doesn't quite capture what we mean by it. Yet, I'd argue that anyone can find the downbeat. It's like the most intuitive thing in music itself. So much so that when I search for other videos on how to find the downbeat in a piece of music, there are very few musicians or music educators who provide strategies on how to do it. It's one of those things that's just so simple that in most cases you're presumed to already know how to do it without any training, which again, that kind of makes sense. I mean, no one ever showed me how to find out where the top of the bar is. I just kind of figured it out. And I'm sure that is a very universally shared experience amongst most of you. It's also worth noting that the videos that do show you how to identify the one tend to either come from dance instructors or DJs, almost all of which, by the way, conclude that the best way to figure it out is to just feel it.
So 1 and 5 are really similar, but 1 feels like beginning of the phrase. 5 is as well feels like a beginning, but kind of like not really a beginning. I know it doesn't make sense. You just have to feel it, okay?
Now the next is to practice to find the one or the first beat in the music. And the way we can do this easily is by starting the song, and as soon as the first beat hits, start counting 1.
And now you have to find that one. It is not as difficult as it might seem. One of the most important things is you need to know your music. Now, in my case, when I'm DJing, I'm not counting at all. That all goes naturally because I've been doing it for so long, but I have to admit, when I started DJing, I wasn't even paying that much attention to counting because I used to drum before I DJed, so counting and beats and bars were natural to me already.
So what are we to do with I'm looking for a man in finance? Is finance on beat 1, 2, 3, or 4? We have remixes interpreting finance on all of these beats, so who's right and who's wrong? Well, let's see. We are stripped of all contextual clues provided from the music itself because, well, there is no music. We can be reasonably sure that finance can't land on any of the e's, ands, or uhs of any part of the bar. And beyond that, we really haven't determined much. I think there's a solid case for 2 options here, finance being on 1 and finance being on 3. Put your music theory caps on, everyone, because we are going back to the land of accents. Finance on 1 can be substantiated in part by where the accents fall in the lyrics that she uses. I'm looking for a man in finance puts the emphasis on the final word finance with both an agogic accent and a tonic accent. An agogic accent is the emphasis of a note with duration. Finance is drawn out longer than I'm looking for a man in. And a tonic accent is an emphasis on a note by way of change in pitch. Now, I know it's spoken word, but we can clearly hear a drop in pitch on the word finance.
I'm looking for a man in finance.
And here's the pitch map, which backs that up.
I'm looking for a man in finance.
On that note, let's consider genre conventions in EDM. Specifically, let's take a look at the drop, a calling card for this style of music. The drop is generally the loudest part of an EDM song. It's preceded by a build-up that will ramp up in intensity, volume, and perceived speed. You'll often hear chopped up vocal samples on loop that will repeat over and over, growing in intensity as we rise on the ramp until we reach a climax and apex of volume where the music will cut, and that is the drop. And did you see what I did there? A prominent feature of the drop is that some line, whether spoken word or vocalized in melody, will be placed moments after everything else cuts, leading us to the next part of the song. The space for the cutout is traditionally about a measure or so, beginning on the 1 immediately after the climax. If we approach our core question with this context in mind, finance being on 1 starts to make a lot more sense. This is further confirmed if we assume that later in her performance, Girl on Couch is mimicking the chopped up vocal ramp of this kind of style.
I'm looking for a man, I'm looking for a man, I'm looking for finance.
You'll notice that she ends the phrase on the word finance right where you'd expect the 1 to be conventionally placed in this style of song. So it looks like there's a pretty good case to be made that finance is supposed to be on 1, but hang on, what about the thousands of remixes that interpret finance on 3? Are they just wrong? Well, that's the interesting thing about it. We analyzed how Girl on Couch might be feeling the rhythm of her song, but does her intention actually matter? I mean, if everyone on the planet interpreted finance as being on 3, then analysis be damned, the correct metrical interpretation of this song would be that finance belongs on 3. Culture supersedes theory because theory exists in part to give a descriptive framework of culture. What matters is what actually exists, not what might or might not be theoretically correct. But perhaps looking at this through the lens of what's right and what's wrong is not the best way to go about it. Music is beautiful because it gives us all an individual voice, a mode of expression, a way to say, hey world, I was here and this is my story. The fact that we can all look at a piece of music and all hear it in different ways, and then from those differences craft new works that are wildly unique and beautiful is just amazing. After all, not all of the remixes out there interpret finance on 3. Not all of them interpret it on 1. In fact, you can find remixes that feature the 1 on any given beat, even the offbeats. Admittedly though, most of these interpretations seem to fall within 2 camps. Finance on 1 or finance on 3. Finance on 3 can make a pretty strong argument as well, because if it's on 3, it means that the word looking has to land on a 1. Looking is the first strong beat of the spoken phrase, and as such is the first place in the sample where you're able to discern a steady pulse that can be organized. This brings up an interesting counter to finance being on 1 that leans less so on the music theory of metrical accents and embodied music cognition, and more so on culture and learned convention of a particular style of music. Let's talk about the case of an electronic musician on his or her DAW. An EDM producer creates music within the confines of their DAW, or digital audio workstation, or in the case of a live DJ, their controller. They make their music in a sense, as all musicians do, with a deep understanding of conventions and expectations in their particular genre. An experienced producer, just like any musician worth their salt, will know exactly when and how to conform to the rules and when to break them. It's quite common to meme around in EDM. Just take a look at this TikTok that made the rounds last year.
What the f do DJs actually do? Because I don't think they're remixing the song on the spot. I think they make it ahead of time. So what dials are they pressing? What are the buttons doing? Is it a volume dial?
This video was memed 6 ways from Sunday for obvious reasons, and a bunch of remixes were had.
What the fuck do DJs actually do?
You'll notice though a familiar trend. Quite a few of these interpretations place the beginning of the sample at the top of the track, locking one to the first discernible beat of the spoken phrase.
What the fuck do DJs actually do?
Maybe this, just like the convention of the drop, is a feature of meme EDM music itself. I don't know. Let's ask someone who knows a thing or two about turning the dankest of memes into EDM bangers.
So my name is Brandon. I'm Tensteps. I am a electronic music producer. These days making a lot of techno and big room and rave kind of stuff. And I remixed maninfinance and it went super mega viral.
Yeah, I think it's you're almost at 5 million hits, which I think, like, barring the David Guetta stuff, I think it's like probably the most popular remix on the platform.
That's what I believe as well.
Yeah.
I think the next most popular was probably the Vandalux one.
Okay.
But yeah, I think mine beat him out.
Yeah, that's just crazy. How are you handling all that? Like, that's pretty neat.
It was a pretty crazy couple of days when it first happened. Luckily, like I didn't really have a lot else going on those few days. Otherwise, my head probably would have exploded. But I literally was like in my living room late at night watching TV and like scrolling TikTok and whatever, and I saw the video, and I saw it and I was like, yeah, this needs a remix. And I almost waited. I was almost like, I'll do it in the morning. I'm tired. I'm gonna go to bed. But luckily, I didn't. I ran upstairs. I did the whole thing in like, I don't know, 45 minutes, and then another 20 to make the video. Posted it. Went to bed. By the time I woke up, it had 500,000 views, and I was like, "Oh, okay, like this is gonna do something.
Right.
This might be a thing." And then by 2 p.m. that day, it had hit 1 million, and then just the next like 4 days were just insane.
That's crazy. It's always like the videos that you don't expect to go mega viral or go mega viral. It's weird how that works.
Yeah.
I want to hone in on those 45 minutes of you making this thing. Specifically, probably I want to hone in on the first couple seconds of. I imagine you download the TikTok, you drag it into the DAW. Walk me through like your process of how you do this, because you have it's a running series on your TikTok where you make random internet people famous.
Yeah, so I just download the video, I throw the audio into Logic, and I usually have some kind of like idea of where I want to go with it. Like if I hear a video or see a video and I don't immediately like have an idea of where I would go with it as a remix, chances are I'm not going to do it. I kind of have to hear it before I go and like spend time on it, even if it's only 45 minutes. And in this case, that one like was really fast. It just came very naturally. Like I kind of knew exactly where everything was going to land. I had it in my head already. But yeah, I'll pretty much just throw it in, and then I'll just open up like Serum or throw in some samples, get a beat going, and just kind of see where it goes.
Yeah, for sure. So for the maninfinance one specifically, are you chopping up her vocals and then like kind of moving them to the grid?
Yes, that one I definitely did. So the interesting thing, and I think one of the things that you're kind of getting at with the interview here is trying to find how it lays, how I chose to lay it out the way it laid out. To me, that the one, I guess, really fell on look. I'm looking for a man in finance, right? And because of that, there was a part that didn't work. And I noticed I was not the only one that took out the trust fund line when it actually came into like putting it into a grid. Because there was one set of words too many to fit in like a 4/4, like a clean bar, like 4-bar piece. And I remember seeing a comment later, why does everyone keep cutting out the trust fund part? And it didn't occur to me. And I think I actually replied to the comment, and I was like, it was one like set of words too many to fit in the 4-bar pattern.
That is super interesting. I didn't even consider that. It basically makes it so that extends out the bar and kind of hangs over that. If you're interpreting it in 4/4, which it'd be weird not to. Although I did have some people who I was asking around. I heard some people say like, "Oh, I hear it in 3," and I'm like, "That's so weird." Or some people who are like, "I heard it on an offbeat." And I'm like, I can't even audiate that
doesn't
in my
compute
head.
for me. Yeah.
Right. There's no musical information to give you like the context of where the sample should land. So people have different interpretations. And I noticed specifically like a lot of electronic producers always kind of, not always, but like a lot of the time seem to put the sample on the first like distinguishable beat. Right, so like I'm looking for a man in finance. I think that finance should go on the 1, but I'm looking is like the first identifiable beat, right? And so I'm wondering, is that like the intuition? Do you think of the genre, or is it more individual?
I think without having without like sitting there and going through a whole bunch of records and seeing, my instinct would be that you're probably correct, that there's an inclination to like, yeah, the first heavy syllable kind of designates the one. Yeah, I think, yeah, again, without like sitting there and going through it, and going through a bunch of examples. Yeah, I could see that being the case.
Yeah, and I wonder if that like is something that's informed by the fact that we're on a video heavy platform. Like you have to. The idea is to get to the content as quick as possible. So
sure.
if you can start it off with the funny thing, with the meme, then that might that might be the intuition. Earlier, I asked some friends of the channel where they intuited the 1 in this sample. These are all, without exception, highly trained and highly skilled musicians and educators who think about music intellectually, theoretically, and practically, like all the time. And if I'm being completely honest, I 100% thought that everyone would hear the downbeat on finance, because that's how I hear the downbeat. And was I wrong? And thinking back on it, it was a bit arrogant of me to believe that everyone would hear it in the same way, as if the way I hear music is the way to hear music. I think that what it means that we all hear the same track in all of these different ways is that despite all being experts in our craft, we all come from different backgrounds, different schools of musical thought, different trainings that all inform our musical worldview in radically different ways. And as a result, the way we as individuals engage in a musical tradition is stamped indomitably by who we are as a result of those who came before us. Thank you so much for coming with me on this examination of metrical perception. It's a bit of a departure from my usual content, but I hope it was valuable all the same. I'm also aware that by the time this video goes live, this trend will probably have left the cultural consciousness. Making videos about current trends is difficult because you have to get them out as quickly as possible because they fade fast. And you know what? I don't really work like that. I'd rather get all my factual ducks in a row and solidify my positions and be a few weeks late to the game rather than jump on a trend without putting the level of attention I think it deserves into it. The amount of on-the-ground research I do for these videos it's pretty intense. That said, I hope what you take away from this video is something deeper than where the 1 is in this particular video of the moment. If you're interested in supporting the channel, or you'd like to learn everything there is to know about microtonal harmony, come hang out with me on Patreon. We've got early access to videos, your name in the credits to those videos, and exclusive microtonal music theory lectures, and all the resources you could ever need to get yourself started on your microtonalist journey. We await you with open arms and a whole lot of notes.
The true essence of the funk is the power of the 1 bop. 1!